We were 200K into the race. There was no way he was going to make it. So he decided to scratch on day one. That basically left me alone north of the start line, hundreds of kilometers away from the other, like from the last person in the race. And we parted ways in the middle of the night. And I just remember I have no chance at this unless I just keep moving. And I didn't stop moving for almost 3 days. I think I covered, I don't even know, almost 1,800 kilometers to catch the rest of the pack, but I eventually did. I was brushing my teeth on the bike, I was eating on the bike, and it paid off. I dropped into the top pack.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy, and I am super excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Sarah Ruggins. I first came across Sarah's name in 2023. The Transcontinental Ultracycling Race was on, I was tracking the dots of those competing, and she was racing in the pairs category. But just a few months prior to the TCR, Sarah still described herself as a self-proclaimed cycling novice, having barely ridden bikes at all. In fact, Sarah's background in sports growing up was actually in long-distance running, a discipline which we could say she definitely excelled in, leaving her with the very real prospect of representing Canada at the Olympics. Sarah's transition from elite long-distance runner to ultra-cyclist is a remarkable story. It was post-surgery to treat a running injury that Sarah unfortunately contracted a neural disease, one which left her with near total body paralysis. Now, I can't fathom what the rehab for Sarah would have been like for the years which followed. Having to relearn simple tasks, the ability to use her hands, move her body, and then ultimately walk again. And yet, fast forward to that first race in 2023, and she was pushing that very body to new limits. A crash just a few hundred kilometres short of the finish line saw Sarah have to scratch from the 23 edition of the TCR, but perhaps with a sense of unfinished business, and with the added benefit of experience or rose-tinted glasses, she lined up for the 2024 edition to race across Europe once again. What followed was indeed a wild ride, and one which I cannot wait to explore further with Sarah. I feel in this episode, listeners, we're going to learn more about her inner resolve, tenacity and quest for continually pushing her boundaries, especially now as she prepares herself for an upcoming Guinness World Record attempt in 2025. All is to say, I'm looking forward to the topics we'll no doubt be discussing today. Sarah Ruggins, a big warm welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Bella. I'm so excited to be here.
This has been a long time in the making, listeners. Sarah and I have been swapping messages since I think you were actually in the TCR potentially racing, and I was annoying you there, Sarah.
That's our first contact, yeah.
It's cool to finally have you here, virtually sat across from me for a session of your own now. I've got so many questions to ask you, but Sarah, a question which I start my show with, and I ask it of all my guests, is, Sarah, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
That's a great question. I mean, I rode a bike as a child, I suppose, but I would say my first memory of being on a bike is probably as an adult. So I got my first bike about 20 months ago.
Which is blowing my mind. Like, timeline listeners, I'm recording with Sarah. It's, December 2024. This episode probably goes out in January. And 20 months ago, how many months before TCR 2023 is that, Sarah?
Yeah, so I applied to TCR 2023 without having a bicycle. That was the somewhat chaotic start to my cycling journey. I had applied as a pair with a good friend of mine who was a cyclist. And I thought, we could ride a bike across Europe. How hard could it possibly be not being a cyclist?
Oh my gosh. So go on. Tell me about this first bike memory of yours then. bike that you got to facilitate the TCR?
Yeah, so I was riding indoors quite regularly on a watt bike, but getting the first bike going outdoors, I think my first ride was about 30 kilometers. It was at the end of March in 2023, so the roads were not great. It was very wet, it was very cold, and I just remember almost redlining, like my heart rate was so high. And I very quickly realized that I was struggling to do 30 kilometers, and in about 5 months' time, I would have to do 4,000. So my first memory really was being an adult on a bike for the first time in well over 15, 20 years and just panicking.
My mind's blown. I've got so many questions, and we're going to get into a lot of those over the next little while. But this could have gone either way, couldn't it? Because it could have been like, oh gosh, no, I can't do this, and you could have bailed out. But you obviously are not of that personality type to say no to a challenge, right?
Absolutely. I was raised by parents who encourage you to tackle every single challenge head on. And they say if you're going to make a dumb decision, you have to make sure you're tough enough to follow through. And quitting really isn't in our vocabulary. And for me, it was a really great opportunity to learn something new as an adult, which I think is really rare. People tend to stay in their comfort zones. I had just come off the back of, I was preparing for a world record run. I'd broken my femur in 3 places, so I couldn't do the run. So the bike was actually cross training for me. And I decided I've already missed my main goal. I have nothing to lose. Let's just double down and see what I can achieve by trying to learn something new.
Even that, gosh, there's so many aspects of your story which I could do an individual session on. Like you were talking there how you were preparing for a world record run and then sustained these injuries, which meant that that was no longer possible. And that's a big deal in itself. But if I rewind you even further, I mean, you've been overcoming injury, illness of a higher magnitude than most could even fathom probably. And this has been something that, well, I guess, I don't know if I should use the word define you, but I guess it's something that has driven you to become the person you are now.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's defined me. On one hand, I used to look at my life as a series of failures because of everything that's happened to me. But I realized that every time I was diverted from what my goals were, my life and my injuries and my illnesses have taken things from me, but they've also given me many things. And so now they've given me a series of traits and characteristics that I deem valuable. While I may not have achieved all the things I've wanted to athletically in my life, I've crafted resilience. I've crafted the ability to stick with something, to stick with discomfort. And I think those are gifts that are now helping me redefine a new sense of adventure with my new capabilities moving forward.
If I was to think of words or attributes that you'd want to have in your saddlebag, so to speak, especially with an ultracyclist, words like resilience is definitely something that you want, the ability to stick with discomfort. It's a given when you sign up for an ultra that you're not going to be comfortable and it's going to hurt.
And when those times come, that's not a reason to panic. That's a reason to celebrate because you've pushed yourself to that limit. And that discomfort means you're approaching your limit. So it should really be a celebration once you get to that point to see how you can endure and how you can emotionally manage yourself through those periods. So once I get to that point of discomfort in events or in my training, I think that's when the actual joy of the event starts, because that's when you're building resilience and that's when you're really testing yourself.
Do you think in those moments of discomfort that you're aware of that? There's times where it's through being through situations that you can draw on experience, and you've been through some pretty rough stuff. Are you now at the stage where, say, fast forward, it's day 9 of the TCR, you've had bugger all sleep, you're hungry, it's really hot, you're being chased by a dog. You could think of a lot of things you'd potentially rather do. In that particular moment, are you thinking, Sarah, you're resilient, you've got this, and this is where the magic happens? Or are you just at a low?
So I feel the lows, absolutely. And I think in ultracycling, anyone who's done long distance cycling will tell you the lows are the lowest points of your life.
They are the deepest low.
But
Totally. Oh my gosh, they're grim. What you think about during those times, right?
Oh, I know. It's life changing. But I think when I'm in those, I recognize that I'm in those low points. But what I've learned is I don't negotiate with myself, because you have literally paid to put yourself in that situation. So when that situation happens, quitting just has never once come into my mind. It's I am there to experience that very moment with the understanding that you will always move through it if you just keep moving forward. Like the low never lasts.
It's one of those things too. The other thing, God, Sarah, I've done one little itty bitty ultra, which doesn't really compare to what you've done, but it was a big deal for me, and comparison is a thief of joy.
Exactly.
It is something that I learnt through those extremes. It's like you get the low, and then it could be within a matter of a few kilometres, and then you're like, oh my gosh, life is amazing. It's amazing to see that personality shift, isn't it?
It's a roller coaster, honestly. I keep voice notes I keep a diary that I've sent to my family and friends, and it could be like two different people speaking to them, like within a 20-minute period. Like you said, like it could be the lowest, like I could be sobbing, and then I could be having the time of my life, like 30 minutes later. I feel like those extremes, they get more pronounced the longer the event is.
I want to rewind you back because we're going to have a lot of opportunity to talk about ultracycling and your participation in these events and that part of your life. But I do want to rewind you back to, I guess, your early sports and I would say sporting career, sporting ambitions. Long distance running, that's obviously something as well where perhaps the early seeds of resilience and dealing with discomfort came in as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I started running at a really young age. I was just in grade school. And my family put me in a track and field club because A, it was inexpensive, and B, I had energy to burn. And they really quickly realized, and the coaches realized, I suppose, I had a natural inclination towards the sport. So I was beating boys, 6, 7 years older than me. And so from a very young age, I was really honing my focus into the singular sport of track and field and middle distance running, specifically. And that kind of evolved up to the point where I was 14, 15, and I was the youngest qualifier for the World Championships in history at that age. So my whole early life was shaped around track and field. It was geared towards being in the Olympics. And I was running with the varsity men's team by the age of 14 years old. So very focused childhood in athletics.
You know, when you've got such ability, is it something that you then go, oh, I could do this and you want to? Or is it something that you feel you need to do because you have that ability?
That's a great question. For me, when I run, and this is true now, and it was true then, I feel like I'm doing what I was put on this planet to do. It feels as natural as breathing. And for me, it was just my calling, and it was just a pure expression of being alive and full of joy. And it was very, very hard work. I'm not going to say it was perfect. I had a lot of anxiety. The performance expectations from coaches was extreme, but for me, I loved it. There was no expectation from my family, no pressure to keep going if I wasn't happy with it. So it was all driven, I think, from both an innate ability and also me just wanting to see how far I could push it.
So you're on this pathway towards an Olympic dream, I guess, and then the worst absolutely happens. I can understand injuries when you're training like this, that you would under is part and parcel of that pathway. But then in dealing with an injury, being beset with what happened to you, gosh, I don't even know how at that age you even come with the mindset to start even fathoming that and comprehending what's occurring.
Yeah, it was difficult at the time, and it's something I never really grappled with until after I had rehabilitated. But I suppose the way it materialized is I was still quite young. I was late teens. I was preparing. I just run a Commonwealth Games qualifying time, qualified for, Junior Olympics. The whole world was my stage at that time. I had torn quite a few ligaments and tendons in both of my feet. So my family and I went to a really good orthopedic surgeon, and we made the decision to operate on both my feet at the same time. So I could rehab in the pool. I would go into a wheelchair for about 6 weeks, but then I'd be healed and I'd be back on the track. What happened is I had that surgery, but then it triggered a neurological response and a disease in my body, which started freezing my limbs. And basically over a period of 3 to 4 months saw me almost completely paralyzed, but with very high levels of pain. So I could feel everything that was happening.
Oh, it's like as if the paralysis isn't like a big body blow. Let's just throw in stacks of pain to go with that. So hang on. Paralysis from the view that you cannot move, but you're physically in pain. So it's not like, I don't want to say typical paralysis, and apologise to those who have dealt with this because I don't understand it. But when I think of someone's paralysed, I think they cannot feel anything. So you can feel everything but not move.
Yeah, so the way it happened is it kills the nerves in your extremities, and it freezes your joints, and it changes the temperature of your skin. And so my limbs basically started turning purple. I lost my abilities starting in my feet up to my hips. I lost the ability to move them, and then it moved into my arms and hands, and then up to the side of my face. And there's a pain scale, a McGill pain scale that objectively measures pain. So if you fracture a bone, that's typically 19 out of 50 on the pain scale. If you get a finger amputated without anesthesia, that's about 40 out of 50. And this disease ranks 46 out of 50. And so I actually lived with that every day for a few years. Had to go, to several different rehabilitation clinics in the US and in Canada. I was fortunate enough to have a family that really lobbied for me to get the appropriate health care. But it was a very, very long battle. And I went from being, completely independent, a very strong young woman, to needing 24/7 care, not being able to feed myself, not being able to hug my family, and also, going through that sustained trauma, not really understanding how to unpack that in the moment and understand what was happening to me.
I was going to ask, like, I can understand the physical rehab support. I'm so happy that your family was able to seek that out. And you sound like you have quite a supportive family around you as well, which I feel is, gosh, necessary for what you're going through. But what about, that mental aspect of it? We often talk in the sport of extreme ultracycling that, yeah, it's a physical challenge, but so much of it's in the mental side of things. With this rehab, did you have mental supports that you could draw on? Or those lows that we were talking about earlier on, were they things that were sort of a constant in your day as well as you're battling through this?
Yeah, so I was fortunate in throughout the process to have, psychologists and psychiatrists helping me from both, counseling to medical, interventions to kind of help with my mental state throughout the process. I developed complex PTSD from the sustained trauma, so that was something I had to work through with the help of therapists for many years after my recovery. But I think what it taught me about mental lows is there was times when I just wanted to give up. If I'm being honest, I didn't care if I lived or died, and I completely mentally just gave up, but my body kept going. And I think there's something really powerful in that because I know what rock bottom feels like and I survived it. So nothing much scares me anymore. So when I'm willingly putting myself in these challenging events and I feel awful, I know that my body can keep going, and it helps me relax and it helps me keep moving forward. In a way, it helped me trust my body and trust my mind that even if you want to quit, it won't let you.
It's things that I've heard of before, like somehow, even through those depths of exhaustion and pain, somehow your body is still able to keep doing. If you can believe that it can keep doing, you've got to have that belief. And oh gosh, Sarah, I could do a whole episode just on this facet of your life, but
It gets better. The story's happier.
it does get happier. But in a way we are, because it, as we said earlier, it's something which occurred to you, which is now part of you and has shaped you into who you are now. How long was that total recovery period for? Like, how long did it take you to be able to, pick up a glass of water, to then, move from a wheelchair to crutches to walking unassisted?
Yeah, it was several years, I would say, end to end. So maybe 2.5, 3. And at that point, I was out, living my life, just not an athletic one. I was still, quite severely underweight. I lost almost half my body weight throughout the ordeal. I wasn't athletic. I had too much pain there, I think, and too much, lost expectations for what my life would be to even think about activity. So I turned quite academic, and it was about probably 10 years after my rehab that I was brave enough to start running again. And from there, that was really a way to kind of heal my mind-body connection and reconnect those parts of me that had been so disconnected over the last decade or so.
And you used the word brave enough to start running again. I came across, I think it was in your Ruler article, I think, where the bravery came into it from you'd not done it for so long and you knew what you could do and you weren't ready for it to feel hard again.
Yeah, and I wasn't, I think that when I was young, we have these expectations for what our life is going to be. And when your life doesn't turn out the way you hoped, for me, that was really traumatic because I had no plan B. I didn't know who I was outside of running. And that got ripped away from me. So I had no real sense of identity once I had recovered. And I think as a result, when I went back to activity, I was so scared I was just going to compare the body I had then to what I could do in my youth. And I would just be reliving that loss over and over and over. So for me, that first run that I took was probably one of the bravest moments of my life, to just confront what I had lost, but also reintroduce what I had used to love so much back into my life in a way that was safe and manageable.
Gosh, you know how I asked the first question, do you remember the first ride you ever did? If I was to say, do you remember that first run post-injury, you could probably describe so much of it. What I'd love you to tell me is, what was the feeling you had at the end of that run?
Joy. I missed it so much, and I realized I put up a pretty good time. And I was so proud of myself for doing the thing that scared me the most and just following through with it and realizing that that didn't kill me. That was actually not too bad. And yeah, that was probably one of the proudest moments of my life, was to be brave enough to try that again.
Because then you really tried that again. You ramped up the runs and the distance very quickly.
Yeah.
And you started preparing yourself for a world record attempt in running at that point, didn't you?
Yeah, so it took about 6-7 years from that first run to build up my mileage and my pace to the point where I was going to attempt the lay jog, so the southernmost to the northernmost points in the UK, Land's End to John O'Groats. I was going to attempt the world record run for that. So just over 1,300 kilometers in about 11 days is what I was aiming for.
And this became your life, a big part of your life for a while, very driven. And I should actually say a big nod to your academia. Those 10 years of building up to that first run, you did fill that time with a lot of years of study as well, right?
Yeah.
And that shaped your profession. But this world record attempt, it was a big driver, a big goal, and then through injury again, that was taken away.
Yeah, so as my mileage ramped, I think what I didn't respect at the time is that my body was different. It wasn't as robust as it was when I was younger. So I had suffered broken pelvis, broken ankles. I needed a few abdominal surgeries. I had torn adductor, and then I had fractured my femur in 3 places throughout the course of those 6.5 years. But every time I was able to recover quite quickly and keep pushing, and it got to the point where the record was feasible. And I was finally prepared mentally and physically to confront, I think, what my dreams were as a young adult, just reimagined, applied to this record. But then, yeah, with the femur breaks, it was about 5 months before the record attempt, so I wouldn't be able to rehab in time. So we decided to call it.
I know, Sarah, you've transitioned into the world of cycling. Non-weight bearing, your body must be thinking, well, it's hard. Is your body singing the praises of non-weight bearing cycling? I'm not sure.
I haven't been injured since I picked up a bike.
There
so
you
my
go.
body's probably like, thank goodness.
Gosh, what took you so long, honey? Is there part of you that feels unfinished business from a running side of point of view, or have you fully just now shifted focus?
I think that injury to my femur and having to say goodbye to the lay jog run attempt was the closure I needed, because for me, it wasn't necessarily about getting a record, but it was a gift to myself to kind of close that chapter in my life. With the running, I've never gotten what I've wanted. My injury and my illness took away my Olympic bid, my Commonwealth Games bid. My body let me down before the world record attempt. And I think when I say my life in a way could be considered a series of failures, that's what I'm referring to. But each time one of those things was taken away from me, it made me stronger in a different way. So I think I'm okay to close the door on running competitively now because I've tried everything I can and I'm aware of my limits physically now.
Does running form part of your ultracycling training still? Like, do you do cross training with running at all?
No, I have been banned by my coaches. They're like, running does not help your cycling. Running just fatigues your legs. Stop doing it.
I'm not a runner, Sarah, and I've tried to become a runner twice in the last few years, and both times have just ended up with like horrendous injuries that have left me walking like a grandma after stupid distances, nothing to even write home about. And it wasn't even a proper run. I'm at walk-run phase of a 5K here, but coming at it from a cycling background of endurance, so you're probably going further than you should when you've never run before, and then, oh, wow, here's some tendonitis for you to deal with and walk through. I won't complain about my injuries. I can't, hold a candle to them compared to yours. But something that I always joke about is I've never seen someone super happy running. And I want to know, when you were running, were you in flow? Like, we talk about flow state a lot. Were you happy running?
Loved it. Like I said earlier, it was, for me, it comes as natural as breathing. I feel like I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. My body was built to be doing it. And it got to a point, every Sunday I was going out and running 40, 50K. I loved it. I mean, not every run was great, I'm sure. I had the pain face on multiple times, but I loved it. There was something freeing about it for me.
Do you get that same feeling now from cycling?
Cycling doesn't come as naturally to me as running does. So I would say I probably look like I'm having less of a good time on the bike.
I've seen your TCR videos, and by day 12, you're certainly not having a good time. You got ultra puffy face going, as the grit and the grime and all the emotions of the ups and downs.
Yeah, I love it. It's not as natural for me, I guess we'll put it that way.
Something that you've mentioned a few times is about like things don't scare you now. I came across a great quote about that, which I guess to me leads to how it became logical for you to go the way that you've done. And it was action before belief. Build a bank of evidence that proves you can do what scares you. And so it sort of goes to you don't need to know everything to get started and to give things a go. Do it. If it scares you, just do it. And you'll find out that you can do it. That's that sort of mantra that you've built yourself, isn't it?
That's the thing. You just got to jump before you're ready. And I was raised, my mother has always been an entrepreneur, always started new businesses. And people love to be armchair critics and say, well, you can't do that. You don't know anything about it. And she always raised me to say, well, how hard can it be? And so every time I start something new, and the armchair critics come out, and I set these big goals, I always have to keep that in my mind. Like, how hard can it be? You just have to throw yourself into it, and then you improvise as you go. And by doing that, you're not going to succeed every time, but you're going to learn so much more than waiting and waiting and waiting until you think you get to this magical point where you're ready. So yeah, my number one mantra is get your teeth kicked in, jump into it, figure it out as you go, and you'll be 10 times better off than if you had just waited.
I mean, signing up for one of the world's hardest ultracycling races without a bike even is probably is jumping in at the deep end and just
maybe don't go that far.
How on earth? Who talked you into this, or was this your idea?
This was not my idea.
Okay,
no, Bella.
Who's responsible? Who do I need to write to?
So there was a gentleman at my gym who we didn't actually know each other, but he was a runner, but also like a prolific cyclist. And he had been following my build up to my running record attempt. And then he obviously saw me get injured, and the Transcontinental in 2023 was due to start the same week as I was going to do my world record attempt. And he approached me and said, look, I don't know many people who can just kind of jump into an endurance race like the Transcontinental. He's like, I know you're injured. I know you don't want your fitness to go to waste. Would you consider pairing with me and we can do the TCR? He's like, there's documentary, there's tons of stuff online, check it out. I didn't check it out. I was like, sure, I'll do it. How hard can it be?
Are you happy you didn't check it out? Like, do you think you would have said no if you checked it out?
I mean, I probably would have said yes, but with a lot more trepidation. So.
Do the thing that scares you anyway.
Exactly. So I just said yes because I was so desperate for all my hard work to not go to waste and kind of fill that void that I had now from the loss of that goal. So that's how we ended up in TCR. We didn't think we would get in because none of us had. I had no cycling background and he had no endurance background. So we were like, they're never going to pick us, but they did, and that's when the panic set in.
Did you buy a bike before they picked you, or was it after the fact?
After. So I bought the bike in February. It got delivered at the end of March.
And the race is in July.
Yeah. I mean, I was training on an indoor bike, but I still had the full leg cast on. So I was like kind of doing it on one leg and like,
oh my gosh, this story gets better.
There's photos of me on an indoor spin bike with like a full femur thing, just like spinning with one leg.
I need to see this. Listeners, if you could see my reaction here, I'm like holding my face. I've got the brain explosion emoji face going.
I work with a fantastic strength and conditioning coach, and like the week after my femur diagnosis, I was on this full leg thing and he like kitted out the rower for me with like a sliding thing so I could put my like whole peg leg like on the side and just slide up and down while I was rowing. So I didn't lose a ton of aerobic fitness, which was absolutely critical.
Are you planning your next bike adventure? Are you wondering how on earth you're going to carry all your gear no matter what type of bike you're riding? Well, whether you're riding a road bike, a gravel bike, a full suspension mountain bike, a steel bike, a carbon bike, an aluminium bike, Old Man Mountain have you covered with their ultra-durable racks and mounts. They're designed to work with any bike. These racks make attaching your luggage hassle-free, so you can focus on the adventure ahead and not be worried that your equipment's going to let you down. Whether it's a weekend trip or a round-the-world tour, their products are the perfect solution for bike travellers like you. Here's the best part. By choosing Old Man Mountain, you're not only equipping yourself with reliable gear, but you're also helping support me in this independent podcast out. Head over to oldmanmountain.com/seek travel ride to learn more. Your new adventure is just about to begin. Now let's get back to the episode. So how do you fast train for a ultracycling event of over 4,000 kilometres in, let me just see, February, March, April, May, June, July, in 5 months?
I had no idea what I was doing, Bella. I tried to go from zero to hero. So I started with like 30K rides every other day. And then what I started to do is I would stack my rides. So I built up to like 100 kilometers once a week. And then I would do 100 kilometers like Saturday, Sunday, and then like 150 Saturday, then 150 Saturday, Sunday. And then I built up to where I could do that like 4 days in a row. And I basically just pushed that as far as I could. Obviously, that's not the best way to train, but I didn't have a coach. So I was just trying my best to build my endurance on the bike.
I wouldn't say it was the wrong way to train, though. And I can appreciate now you have a coach and you've optimized your training quite a lot, obviously, and you're honing in on different areas that you want to. But I wouldn't say that building your base miles and then gradually increasing them is necessarily the wrong thing. It's funny. Yeah. It gave me flashbacks to a few years ago where I was doing something similar. And the funny thing there, Sarah, is I reached out for a coach and I think I got mansplained to a bit, actually. And so then...
Oh, no.
But then I just thought, stuff it, I'll just do it on my own. And, you know, again, like you, maybe I didn't do the right things, but I did do it. So...
Hey, if it got you to where you wanted to be, then it was the right way.
I always, and I've said it a few times on my show, Sarah, I always said for me, success was getting to the start line, because the rest of it in an ultra sometimes is out of your hands and who knows what's going to happen. But to get to the start line requires such dedication and effort to feel that you are in a position where you can start. So that was my success there. Does that resonate with you at all?
Absolutely. I agree completely. And I'm always of the mantra, make the training more difficult than the event to the extent you can. I mean, with Transcontinental, there's some pretty difficult moments, but yeah, just the dedication, the discipline, and, you know, the time management you need to get through those miles is really a gift to yourself. So by the time you get on the start line, you have the confidence that you can do the hard thing.
You also had another motivator. Well, motivator might be the right word to use because you fundraised for the Transcon as well. And I bring it up because I feel like your fundraisers are your way of giving back because it was charities that gave so much to you during your rehab.
Yeah, that's correct. A lot of the time when I was dealing with my illness and my family was dealing with the illness, for example, we had to travel a lot to different hospitals around the country and even in other countries. And we relied on charities that would allow my family to, for example, live close to the hospital where I was receiving inpatient treatment. So I could be with my family, even though we were down in the US, let's say. We could afford to be together while I was receiving treatment. So charities really helped us stick together as a family unit and ensure that I had that kind of safe space around me that would help me with my healing. Now that I'm privileged enough to, have a seat at the table and able to use my voice, it's really important that I use these events, well, they are for me to be able to challenge what I think is possible for myself. It's important we use the platform where we have it to generate awareness for, in particular, small charities that are kind of operating on the front lines.
I'm happy for you to shout out some that you feel really close to.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe we can talk. So the ones that I've fundraised for in the past are through the St. James's Place Charitable Foundation. So it's a variety. They're a grant-making organization that give to a variety of small and medium-sized charities across the UK. So, for example, they fund ones for youth suicide prevention and mental health destigmatization. There's ones that provide individuals with physical and mental disabilities opportunities to participate in communities through sport and through social activities like gardening. And then there's youth zones that have been developed across the country that pair at-risk youth from challenging socioeconomic backgrounds with counselors and community-based support to help them integrate and further their education. There's a whole variety of charities that we've fundraised for through the foundation over the past 2 years, and I found a great new one that we're looking to partner with next year.
I want to talk about then the TCR 2023. I actually want to focus a lot more on 2024, but I can't bypass 2023 at all because I feel, oh gosh, where do I even start, Sarah? I said this a few times, but there's a lot of prep that needs to go into it. And I want to know how a total novice paired with someone who hasn't got the endurance background, how as a team of two, how do you prepare for the race as a pair?
Yeah, I think we were both so nervous that we just completely over-engineered it, but it worked in our favor.
That sings to my heart. Anxious person here.
Yeah,
if there's ever anything you can overthink about, ask me.
Honestly, we had like plan A, plan B, plan C. So my partner in 2023, my race partner, he's an engineer and I work in finance. So we are analytical people. We love planning. So we basically broke it down. He was really into the map making. So we looked at building our maps as a function of daily mileage, elevation, temperature, wind, and like compounding fatigue. So we kind of built our maps to optimize for what our strengths were around those areas. And then I was really interested in the kit list, not knowing anything, but having a research background. I basically just took to the internet and tried to research and find every ultra rider I could, from the super competitive to the kind of amateur hobbyists, to try to understand what they brought, what they used, and what mistakes they made. And from there, we created kit lists. And then we just kind of hope for the best.
And you know how you were talking about you had A, B, and C sort of scenarios. How many times did you find you were going down to C scenarios and then even then going, okay, we need a plan D?
Honestly, it was A scenarios the whole time.
Do you think that was a fluke or it was just through so much great preparation? There were a bit of both.
I think it was a little bit of both. I think it was that we had planned it within an inch of our lives. We had spent months planning it. We would cross-reference the maps with Google Street View. We would speak to other riders in the area who lived in the area. Like, we planned everything because we were so scared. And then I think it was just a great deal of luck as well, because as we know with these events, you can be the best athlete and not make it to day 2 if things just don't work out in your favor. It was a mix of planning and good luck.
I want to talk about unexpected moments then, because when you plan as much as you do, perhaps when the unexpected occurs, it really takes you by surprise? What was something that really took you by surprise?
So in the first TCR, it was um, how awful it felt to be climbing as much elevation as we did.
You don't like climbing, do you?
You know what? I'm better now. I'm actually pretty good now, but it was a big weakness of mine going into the first TCR in 23. And I think just having from day 2 we were in the Alps, and I think it was the most elevation in TCR history that year. It was horrible, and I got a stress response, my entire body and face puffed up.
Ultra puffy face.
Yeah, it surprised me, and I knew it was going to be bad, but I didn't know how bad it was going to be.
And then when you see that, I guess that's where you need to have the self-management of your own sort of mindset, isn't it? To keep things calm or to acknowledge, okay, this is happening, but you just got to keep getting through.
Yeah, I just realized during that, I was like, my stress release was crying. And I was like, it's okay, you can cry as long as you keep pedaling. You can cry as much as you want. Just keep moving forward.
Do you know a point on that race where I think I would definitely be crying? And I say this with such certainty. I'm pretty sure it would be the case, but in ultras, you cry at random things too.
Yeah.
It would have been when you hit the atrocious gravel parkour. That was horrendous. I've seen it on many people's YouTube clips, and I've just thought, oh my gosh, you've got to do this far in on that level of fatigue. It's not so much the pain of turning the pedals at that point. It's perhaps the questionable unrideability of those roads.
Are you referring to the one in Albania?
Yeah.
So John and I got the second fastest time in the entire TCR race on that one.
Whoa. Okay. I want to know what your strategy was there. Was that again down to equipment? Was it time of day? Was it mental prep?
So I think there's a few things going on. So first, our equipment. So we optimized our bikes for the gravel riding because we knew it was going to be really tough. So our wheels were really robust. They weren't built for speed. They were built to not get punctures.
That's a great hack.
Yeah.
I remember listening to a podcast about that actually. He said he gets this question all the time. It's like, oh, I'm doing a ride and it's a mix of asphalt and gravel. What sort of tyres should I have? Because I don't want tyres that are going to slow me down on the asphalt. And it's like, you're going to lose the most time by not having the right tyres for the gravel. Go the gravel, because you're not going to go as fast as you think you're going to go on the asphalt anyway.
Exactly. Both TCRs I ran with the Specialized Pathfinder Pros. I had 36s. I had tire inserts and I ran tubeless, and I didn't get a single puncture both times.
Did you have to do a lot of hiker biking on that gravel parkour as well, though?
Not on that one. We rode the entire thing. But I think it's because our bikes were optimized. They were gravel bikes with good tires. B, we had made sure we had taken a pretty good break the night before. So we got into the control point and we were good for more than 2 hours, which was a luxury. And then we took off at about 3 a.m. So we missed the sun in the heat of the day. And then I think the final thing that allowed us to ride it so fast is like we just genuinely didn't care if we lived or died at that point. We were so tired.
Did you have any shepherd dogs come chasing you on that section? I saw a few people get chased by shepherd dogs, which are the scariest type of dogs, I think, actually.
Yeah, so there was a mastiff at the very top of the hill, which was waiting for us. And I did the exact opposite of what you should do. So John was ahead of me, and then I just like screamed and like started to smash watts through the pedals to get away. But then they think it's a game. So if a dog is chasing you, get off your bike, like between you and the dog. Don't do what I did, which is like scream and then try to like outrun the dog.
I want to ask about this because it's something I've dealt with. I live in the Pyrenees in France, and we have a lot of, well, in French they're called patous, but they're big Pyrenean dogs, and they're exactly that. They're shepherd dogs, and their job is to protect the flock. So they are guard dogs. They're not, oh, wow, you look lovely and fluffy and beautiful. Come and let me pat you type of dogs.
Yeah.
I want to know, when you do get off, how long are you waiting for the whole situation? Like, do they eventually just go, oh, okay, you're fine, and let you pass? Or are you sort of bike between you, slowly walking your way through?
It entirely depends on the dogs. And like some countries, I don't know, I'm actually quite interested in this culturally, how this develops, but like some countries, the dogs are far more aggressive than others. Like in Turkey, for example, I just got barked at a lot, but you could scare them away. But in Greece, they would attack you.
I've heard that Greece is the worst, and there's like packs of them. Like there can be like 11 or 12 of them at a time.
Yeah.
That is like my nightmare fear.
Yeah. So, and then like you'll be going down the road and then some will start barking and then that will alert others down the road. So you can see them coming at you. So I think If you get off the bike, you don't always have to get off the bike. It's kind of judging the situation.
Yeah.
If you do, I would only get off the bike if it was a really big dog that I was aware of that I could not outrun. And then it can be like instant. They can, come at you. Sometimes they'll just bark, but if you yell, they'll kind of back off and let you pass. I find I travel with a bunch of really small, like rape alarms that emit a really high frequency noise, and that can deter a lot of them.
Isn't it sad that you travel with a rape alarm? And is that for the dogs or is that for...
It was for the dogs. Yeah. I came prepared this year. I was like, I need something to deter them. So it worked.
You did get bit in the 2024 edition this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't get the alarm out in time. I think it was the first or second dog I came across in Croatia. So we just entered into dog territory and I wasn't expecting it. And it just shot out of the bushes.
I don't want to get to 2024 yet. I do want to go through 2023 a little bit because you did do that as a team of two. And did you find up until the point where you unfortunately crashed and, as I said, had to scratch, like that's got to be gut-wrenching at that point in the race as well. But did you find doing it as a pair that was a great way of experiencing the race?
Yeah.
You obviously didn't have anything to compare it to at the time, but did you find you were thriving doing it as a team of two and working together? Or were there times where you're like, I wish I was on my own here?
No, so I can't speak for John, but I never wanted to be on my own. I had no confidence. I didn't know bike mechanics. Yeah, like I didn't know anything. So I was like, I need somebody here with me constantly, like babysitting me through this entire thing. We didn't have a single argument throughout the entire thing. And I think it's because like we didn't know each other very well when we started. And so we approached it like colleagues and we had a few rules. So like number one, like don't try to hang on to any dignity. Like we all know when you're ultracycling, like there's no secrets on the road, just get over it. Number two, don't try to be a hero. So communicate openly with how you're feeling. And if you need help, like don't try to be tough. And then number three, I think what we did is we just really, my purpose was to make sure John was okay. And John's purpose was to make sure I was okay. And that helped take our mind off how bad we were feeling because we were constantly like checking on the other and helping the others. And so we actually worked really well together as a team. I think A, because we didn't have that emotional like connection to each other because we didn't really know each other. And then B, because we approached it quite clinically, I think, in how the team was built and what our roles were.
I can see where being a pair in that type of event has its real benefits because you've got someone else to problem solve with, you've got someone else to help take your mind off things, cheer you up, have conversations with that aren't just with yourself.
Yeah.
And that's a real big plus. But there can also, I've spoken to people where it can sometimes feel like a burden because you could be on the ultimate high and they're on a low and you only go as fast as the slowest rider at that day, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think I've been fortunate so far. I've never felt like being in a pair is a burden because, even if you're having to pull someone, if they're going through a low point, it will happen to you as well. So I think in any case, it's motivating to have someone else there. And it comes down to the individual attitudes and just if you're aligned on your objective and what you're trying to achieve and you kind of just keep focusing on that shared goal, then you'll be absolutely fine.
When we talk about lows in an event, I imagine crashing and injuring yourself. I think you fractured your wrist.
Yeah.
Did you know straight away that was race over or did you try and go, I can deal with this?
Oh, I tried. I tried so hard. I was like, not again. I'm not.
Of course you did.
Yeah, I had crashed. We were coming down. We had hiked a bike up a Greek mountain from like 11 p.m. till 3 a.m.
What a random sentence. We hiked a bike up a Greek mountain from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m.
I know. Things I never thought I would say. But we were trying to ride down it. It was quite technical. We're very sleep deprived. I think there was 2 days left in the race or something. We were just outside the final control point. And I crashed. The crash wasn't that hard, but I just landed really oddly and fractured my wrist. But I kept going. I knew something was wrong, but we kept going till we got to like the next town. And we just kind of lied on like some patio furniture to rest for a few hours. And when we got up, I think I made it like 400 meters down the road. And I was like, I can't hold my bars. Like there's literally nothing I can do. I tried taping it. So I sent John on his way. I was like, take all my money, take my battery packs. I was like, you have to finish the race. Just leave me here. So that's how it ended for me.
Oh, yeah. I can't fathom what it's like to feel that because again, something you've trained so hard for. I have joked because I've felt this before. There have been times during my training, especially feeling the lows where sometimes you want not yourself to break, but maybe a piece of your equipment to break to just give you the excuse to not have to keep going. At least that's my twisted mind. Did that ever happen?
I think that's why we did so good on the Albanian parkour, the gravel one, because I was like, I'm just going to send it down this gravel mountain without any regard for personal safety. Because I was like, if I get hurt, I don't need to ride my bike anymore. So.
I don't want to say I feel happy to hear you say that, but yay, there is a bit of normal there.
Yeah, no, and if someone says they haven't thought that, they're lying. Like,
Totally. 2023 finishes in not the way that you want it to.
You know what, though? I've never been happier having to scrap.
And proud, like, whoa, like you achieved mega things.
We were the third place pair when I went down. Like,
it's crazy.
Yeah.
Talk about kicking it out of the park. What expectations did you actually have lining up for that race? No expectations. It was a total unknown, but what goals were you setting for yourselves?
I wanted to make it to the first control point. I wanted to make it to day 3. And I was like, if I make it to day 3, I'm going to be the happiest woman in the entire universe. There was no expectations because nobody thought we would be able to achieve anything because both of us had no idea what we were doing.
And yet doing what you did showed that you could get it done.
Yeah.
Before 2024 TCR, though, you did have Race Around Rwanda, which you signed up for. And that taught you some lessons in a different way, didn't it?
It sure did. Yeah. So Race Around Rwanda was in February 2024. I was going to use it as training, actually, for TCR 2024. And I'm calling it the most expensive 95 kilometers of my life.
Yeah.
I got food poisoning and had to scratch after a few hours.
Rwanda isn't a place you want to have food poisoning in when you're in an ultra race either, because you're never alone.
At one point, I was on all fours being violently ill, surrounded by children in an incredibly rural village trying to touch my skin because I'm quite heavily tattooed, which is incredibly rare. And it was probably one of the most mortifying moments of my life. But I knew at the time, I was like, I'm going to laugh about this one day.
Here we are.
And here we are. Yeah.
Is there unfinished business at Race Around Rwanda, do you think? Like, do you think you would ever actually go back there?
So I absolutely love Rwanda. It is one of the most beautiful, friendly, diverse countries I have ever been to.
Mm.
And I absolutely loved every aspect of it, food poisoning not included. But I wouldn't go back to do the race. The race is exceptionally organized. I would recommend it to anyone who loves gravel racing. But I think for me and the disciplines I'm interested in are slightly longer. So Race Around Rwanda is 1,000 kilometers of gravel. I tend to want to do a little bit longer distances with more days out on the road. Yeah.
Quickly, it's slight diversion, but you did mention it. You are heavily tattooed, and it's remiss of me to not ask about that. I think I saw, it was after your 2024 TCR, you actually got the map of your route inked on you, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
When did the tattoo start? For someone who's heavily tattooed like that, am I right to call it an obsession?
Probably. I think you're getting the theme in my life. It's like I don't do anything by halves. So
Totally not.
Yes, I do have a full suit of tattoos. So it goes, from my ears down to my toes. My entire body's covered. So I suppose you could say it was an obsession. I started when I was in my early 20s. So I was a lot later, I think, than others. The same gentleman has done all of my tattoos. So for me, it was more about, I think, the process. And it helped me kind of reconnect my body and mind. It helped me control the way that I present myself out into the world. And I think for that, I really valued it. So it's not really so much about the individual designs as it was the process and being able to control, I think, my own aesthetics and how I show up in the world, and hopefully break some stereotypes for professional women and athletic women as well.
Absolutely, because when we talk about professional women, I mean, you're kicking goals in the ultracycling world, but it would be fair to say you're kicking goals in your profession as well.
I'm trying to.
And break down barriers there too.
Exactly. It's important for me. And a lesson I've learned is we need to occupy space. Any minority that's been given a place at the table, it's so important to use your voice and to occupy space and act as an example so that others who come after you are a little more free than you have been. So, for example, in my professional career, I never try to hide my tattoos. I never try to, hide my interests outside of work. And I just try to be as open and authentic as possible to make way for others as well.
Are you curious about bikepacking but not sure where to start? Or maybe you're starting to think about where you could go for a 2025 bikepacking trip. Well, in late June this year, I am hosting a fully supported lightweight bikepacking tour, which is designed for adventurers of all levels. Together, we'll be spending 6 nights and 5 days exploring the stunning landscapes which are within the Pyrenean foothills. There won't be any massive mountain passes on this route, but you will be enjoying a full sensory experience filled with discovery and camaraderie amongst a group of like-minded people. Spots are limited, so don't wait. Visit seektravelride.com for all the details and secure your place on the tour. I cannot wait to ride with you, and let's share some experiences together. Okay, now back to the episode. Let's go back to racing bikes. Rwanda ends with a scratch due to illness. Was 2024 a case of unfinished business with the TCR, or were you just hooked on this event?
I think for me, it was unfinished business. I was so proud of how John and I did in 2023 as like complete amateurs. And then I figured, look how well we did, not knowing what we were doing with very limited time to prepare. What can I achieve if I actually went tunnel vision on this? Because I never anticipated. I told John when we were on the way to TCR, I was like, this bike is going to be for sale before we even like get back to the UK. And it turns out I actually quite liked it. And it was teaching me a lot about myself. It was teaching me patience. It was teaching me resilience. So I was like, I just want to keep going. And I want to try for myself to just finish this thing. It was so close. I decided I signed with a coach in March. I found an incredible coach, somehow convinced him to work with me. I think he took me on as more of an experiment. And I really just began really deep focus, early in 2024 to really prep as much as I could in a more professional and targeted way for TCR 24.
Obviously, prepping with a coach this time was a change, but what was something that you did change, maybe equipment-wise or something for 2024? And that was through experience. Like, what did you hone down? Because I've got listeners for sure who are listening to this because they're intrigued, potentially want to sign up. I have signed up and then going through the panic training. What's a piece of advice that you changed through experience of having done it the year before?
Yeah, so I would say none of my equipment changed. I'm happy to kind of talk through my equipment, but I was confident I made the right choices. I run really minimal with all my equipment, so we can talk about that if the listeners would be interested. But from a training perspective, what my two coaches really helped me understand is that more is not better. So I was still training a lot. In my peak, I was 32 hours a week in the saddle.
Which is phenomenal. Like, that blows my mind, Sarah.
That was in addition to the strength training I was doing with my strength coach.
And your full-time job.
And a full-time job. But those miles were predominantly base miles. For example, now I'm in the off season. We're doing some reverse periodization. So I'm working on my LC1 and LC2 and max VO2 targets to try to bring those up. So a lot more like power-based work on the bike. So now I'm only riding about 15 hours a week, but that will scale up as we prepare for May. Yeah, I would say more is not always better. It needs to be thoughtful and well prepared.
Can I ask, what does a rest day look like for you then?
So a rest day for me at the moment is usually about 90 minutes to 2 hours of easy cycling. Do some mobility work in the gym. It's very rare that I don't do anything on a rest day. So typically just very much like zone 1 pedaling for a couple hours is what my rest day looks like. And then of course at work all day on top of that.
Do you have like mental training involved in your training as well? Like, are you someone who's sort of got like mindfulness techniques, meditation, yoga, those sort of things, or is training your meditation?
I think training is what keeps me calm. The way I think about endurance activity, and I really honed this when I was running, is that I think these type of sports I think of them as moving meditations. So if there's a way you can kind of get into that flow state, you don't need distractions. So I don't train with like Zwift. I don't have a TV. I don't have an iPad. When I'm indoors on the bike for hours, I just sit there and I either listen to music or sometimes pods. But for me, it's more like a moving meditation, an opportunity to work through everything I need to work through, whether work or personally, and then just kind of give some of that time back to myself as well.
All right, let's get into 2024 because this is a very unique race. I was watching quite a lot of it. I actually had COVID during your race, so I had lots of time in bed to scroll and take my mind off my own misery by watching other people's misery. Something that was very unique. So you signed up again, you were a team of two with John?
No, I was with another individual this time. He was in a pair competing with us in the TCR in 2023. And we were leapfrogging each other the whole time. But he lost his pair for 2024. And John didn't want to participate in 2024. So I decided to partner with this individual.
Okay, so you signed up with a team of two. Very early on, it was pretty apparent that your strategy was different to the other dots. And what I mean by that is, listeners, if you're not aware of it, TCR has a series of control points. You're pretty much racing across the continent of Europe. It's roughly around 4,000 odd kilometres. I say roughly because each competitor has to plan their own route. You have to hit checkpoints and there's parkours which are mandatory. But outside of that, it's a freestyle. And your route, it was pretty clear, I think from day one, that you guys were totally going not off the script here, right? It was a crazy move. I want you to talk us through that.
Yeah. So I guess for those who weren't aware, basically, it was pretty much a straight shoot south to the first control point from the start of the race. All the riders basically took off straight south. Mark and I took off northeast. People thought we were lost. Like, you should have seen all the messages I was getting. Like, where are you going? You've made a terrible mistake. And so we actually went northeast and looped all the way around to like the east of Germany before coming down. So we ended up doing about an extra 250K to go around the competitors. But what we did is, with these free routing races, behaviorally, people still just want to straight shoot and do the fastest route from point to point. But in this race, the shortest line had a ton of elevation in it. But we knew behaviorally a ton of people would just do that. We were really strong on the flat. And so we decided to take a punt that we could do that extra 250K faster than the other racers could if they were to go straight. So that's exactly what we did. And by the end of day 3, I had looped all the way around and I went from being the very last one in the race to the top 20 of the men's race.
I remember watching that. It was like you had slotted in and you go, thanks for watching.
I had the best I told you so to everybody.
I was so living your moment there. And when you say you had looped around, this is a very, very important facet of your journey because you lost your pair up there, right?
Yeah. So actually, when we were still north of the start line, my teammate had to scratch because he suffered a really awful knee injury on one of the climbs. He couldn't go on. We tried to get him some medical help, but it was like we were 200K into the race. There was no way he was going to make it. So he decided to scratch on day 1. That basically left me alone north of the start line, hundreds of kilometers away from the other, like from the last person in the race. And we parted ways in the middle of the night. And I just remember I have no chance at this unless I just keep moving. And I didn't stop moving for almost 3 days. I think I covered, I don't even know, almost 1,800 kilometers to catch the rest of the pack. But I eventually did. I was brushing my teeth on the bike. I was eating on the bike, and it paid off. I dropped into the top pack.
You know, when you were saying with the first race in 2023, success for you was getting to the first control point. You must have been buzzing when you got to that first control point in 2024, given what you did on your freaking own.
It was really scary because I doubt, at that time, I still doubted my abilities on the bike. I was scared for my safety. I was scared for mechanical issues. And I just didn't think I could do it by myself. And the fact that I pulled it off, granted, not as well as I could have if my pair was with me, but I still pulled it off by myself. I was over the moon. So, like, anything that happened to me from that point on, I felt invincible.
I remember at the time there were like these little dot simulation videos you could do, and you could press play and you could see the dots spread out, and it was so cool to watch you track up and then go and just slot right in. I often think when I interview people, what is your most proudest moment? And I couldn't imagine. I feel like you deserve to be so proud of that, of the whole race, but especially just that idea that you lose your race partner 200 k's into like a 4,500 nearly kilometre race early in the race, like day one. Had day one even finished before he'd had to pull out?
Day one was finishing, but he did scratch on day one, and we were still, our latitude was north of the start line. So I actually raced the entire TCR from the start line down by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy. And then what was to follow? Because you took the label of the orphaned dot, because you were in this pseudo thing where you were the pair that's not a pair, but not solo, but not female, but not official or a GC ride.
Yeah.
That was also a very, that was a pretty big deal on this ride too, right?
It started a big debate because I showed up at the first control point delighted with myself.
Hell yeah.
And I was greeted and I was basically told I couldn't have my brevet card stamped. None of my data was going to be recorded and populated. And I was no longer allowed a finish in TCR because my pairs partner dropped, even though I had done nothing wrong. And they said I could not be counted on the pairs race because I'm not a pair anymore. I couldn't be counted on the solo female race, even though from the time I crossed the latitude of the start line, I had been solo. And I couldn't qualify for general classification either. But they said if I really wanted the souvenir, I could have my brevet card stamped.
That's pretty gutting.
Yeah, it wasn't a great way to be greeted, but that just lit the fire in me even more to keep going and talk about the experience. Not because I was angry at race control, but I think there should be a way that athletes can still be recognized and people can track them if something happens outside of their control. So lobbying for is an orphan dot category. If people are brave enough to keep going, they should be recognized and being able to talk about their position in the field.
I'm totally for that. And I was wondering, actually, has there been anything come out of all of this? Do you know of? Like, there was discussion at the time. Has anything actually come out of it?
Yeah, so at the time, there was some really fantastic debates on both sides going on. So some of the posts I was making had over 600 comments on it of people just debating whether this should even occur, whether if I should be treated in the solo female race, whether I should be racing in pairs. I think compounding that with some of the debate that I had started regarding the disproportionate disadvantage of minorities in the race, especially going down to some of the more challenging countries in the Balkans. And because of that, the TCR team actually decided to disqualify me for what they call harassment for speaking out about gender.
I didn't realize that had happened.
Yeah.
Wow.
But to their credit, I have to say we've been working on dialogues. So I do have a call with them to talk about the importance that I ascribe to diversity versus inclusion, diversity on the start line versus inclusivity in races, and how I would like them to at least consider revising the rule book, not just for orphan dots, but for minorities more broadly. So I feel like my experience, I could have potentially handled some of the communication better. They could have definitely handled some of the communication better, but I think we're moving forward and I'm really excited to start a dialogue with them about it.
Well, it's good to know that the dialogue's open there and that potentially some good things are going to come out, because I think the issues that you shine a light on, orphan dot stuff aside, the whole diversity v inclusion aspect of the race, I think is something that needs a lot of thought and discussion around. And the reason that this came up for you was your experience of the race as a woman was completely different in some countries to what it would be like as a man. I'm really, really proud on this podcast, listeners, to especially shine a light on women doing bike adventures, because if we see it, we can do it. And if I share the stories of women, women will listen and do the adventures as well. But I'm very aware of the fact that the way we do adventures comes with a different mindset and different challenges than the way that men will do adventures, because of the way our lovely world is.
Oh.
And you experienced this, especially in the Balkans, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So I can give you an example of how this played out with me. And this is just my personal experience. But for example, there was there was one night when I wanted to stay in a hotel. There was a ton of other riders that were there as well. So I was like, I'm just going to rock up here and spend a few hours here because it wasn't really a safe area. And I got there. The owner of the hotel was drunk. His assistant was drunk. And basically, what they're doing is they were giving all the male riders hotel rooms. And I went up there, asked for a room, and they said, there's no more, but you can room with us if you want. So at which point I was like, no, thank you. So I went into, one of the other riders was there with me when I was checking in, and he offered kindly. He was like, would you like to stay in my room with me? Just because it's obviously safer. But I didn't want to get him in trouble with the rules because that would be considered outside help.
Oh my gosh, of course.
Which could disqualify him, but I was already technically disqualified because my pair dropped. But I didn't want to put him at risk, so I said no. So I slept actually where all the bikes were. There was about 20 bikes in the pool room. So I went there, but what had happened is the owner of the hotel, he was going around locking all the doors, so we were all locked in the hotel. And him and his assistant kept coming into the pool room to look at the bikes. And I was only there for 3 hours, but I couldn't sleep. Like, I had my multi-tool in my hand, and I was like, I knew where every exit was. Because I was like, this is not safe. Like, they're coming looking at me. And I was like, if they get within 2 feet of me, I'm going to scream bloody murder. All the other men had hotel rooms. So that night, because of my gender, I had to forego rest. I had to forego a safe place to sleep. And I was put at risk for what could have potentially been sexual assault. And I had no recourse, because if I was to accept help from another rider who had the benefit of his gender, I could have disqualified him, or I could have been further penalized myself. And so what I started a dialogue is that women experience the world very differently from men. Men need to feel safe too, but women experience it differently and disproportionately. And when institutions like Lostock create a rule book where they encourage diverse applicants, but they do not provide flexibility for those applicants to seek safety in situations, they're creating very dangerous environments for the minorities that they're trying to attract. So that was the conversation I was trying to start that ultimately led to me being expelled for harassment of the Lostock staff.
But sounds like perhaps progress is going to be made on that front.
I'm optimistic.
I know that in 2025 they're really pushing to get 100 women to the start line, because despite all best efforts, 20% of applicants be women at the start line at the moment. I'm not even sure if that's. I don't think it's 1 in 5.
I think it's very important to get women and different minorities to the start line, and I support any organization that does that, but with the understanding that the rules need to evolve to be inclusive of that diversity. I'm inclusive of the fact that some of those minorities will receive disproportionate disadvantage in some of these regions, and they should not be prohibited from seeking help. And I don't think that ruins the spirit of the race. I think if anything, it improves it. That's what I'm hoping to engage on moving forward. And I'm really optimistic we'll be able to make some moves there.
Yeah, and I mean, TCR aside, if there's other race organisers that listen out to this or come across your discussions, I hope that it's something that triggers them into that thought, because it could also be something that until it's brought to someone's attention, they're completely blind to the idea that it's a thing.
And race organisers that are doing this really well right now is Via Race.
They are. Shout out to you, Via Race.
Shout out to Via.
Actually, shout out to listener Dean. Hi, Dean, who listens from Pambula in Australia. You're a legend, a super fan, and he did Via Race this year. He had to scratch, but did phenomenally well up to that point.
Oh, good job, Dean.
Maybe he's signing up again. Who knows? I remember there were times where you sort of went back on yourself because you also didn't feel safe at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you think you would have felt safer as a guy?
In those situations, no. So there was one, I had done about 1,000-meter gravel climb. It was horrible. And then I got to the top, and there was some locals in a pickup truck, and the sun was just setting. I was in Bosnia, and they basically came up and were like, what are you doing up here? There's bears up here. And guys, I'm Canadian, right? So like any talk of bears, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get mauled. I was like, I need to get out of here.
Oh, wow. I thought that was going to go totally Sarah, I thought that was going to go totally the other way. I thought you were going to say, I'm Canadian. I'm like, oh, yeah, whatever. Just like if you tell an Aussie that there's a snake somewhere. aware but not alarmed. But you are aware.
No, we're like hyper aware. So these individuals were like, you cannot be up here. Like, there's been bears spotted here. Like, you have to get down off the mountain. So I was like, oh my God, I need to get down off the mountain. So I like descend down this 1,000-meter gravel climb that I just suffered up. And I get to this town, and there was a festival going on in the town. It was the weekend, drunk people everywhere. And there was a big group of young men who thought it would be funny to block my access to the town and like try to like mess with my bike. And again, this is in a country where I don't know what I can get away with. Like, I don't know if I can, raise my voice at them. I don't know what the safe kind of protocol is. So I just kind of very passively negotiate my way out of that situation. I couldn't find a hotel, so I ended up sleeping just outdoors rough that night, just kind of hidden away from them. And then I tried again to make the pass in the morning. So would I have been safer if I was a guy? I mean, I don't know. Would the locals have told me I couldn't be up on the mountain if I was a man? I don't know. The drunk men, would they have tried to take my bike if I was a man? I don't know.
You'll never know. But you had to make the decision for yourself. And you're doing this, shout out, on not much sleep.
No. A lot of fatigue. But I think this is where the rule book could be adapted as well. So if a rider, for example, me with those drunk men, there was other riders that went by me to go take the pass that night. And if I could have ridden with them up the pass, I would have felt safer going through that town with all the drunk men. And I don't think it would have been a material advantage because we were hiking a bike up 1,000 meters. So it's not like we were drafting.
And that drafting rule, I know there's been controversy in 2023. I think there was a lot of controversy in TCR.
Yeah.
I'm going to move away from that. But your points are so valid, and I hope that we see forward progress on that, which, again, is a larger step towards proper inclusion in these events as well. You did finish 2024 as the orphan dot, not a pair, not a solo female, not a GC, whatever. That was really a personal, what would I call that? That was a personal drive to get to that finish point, knowing that it was totally unofficial, things weren't getting stamped. You'd been disqualified for speaking out. How did you feel on that, getting there?
I felt vindicated. I felt all my hard work had come to fruition, and I felt the more they were trying to silence me, or call me out for just sharing my experiences, and the more it propelled me forward, because I felt like my experiences were important, and I wasn't doing it to get a GC finish or to get a place. But if I had, I would have been the third place pair and the third place solo female.
She's nuts. Can we have a shout out? What was your time?
12 days.
12. Whoa. I had you at 13. 12. Blows my mind.
12 days, and that includes 9 hours out for a mechanical. And then those nights in Bosnia, I had to, backtrack myself.
And the huge diversion. I love this. Sarah, you're a legend.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I just felt like I wasn't doing it. I think for me, it was just the more I got cut out of the race, the more I was determined to show that, like, I don't care about finishing in a certain place. I care about proving to myself that I'm going to do exactly what I say I'm going to do, irrespective of what others' views are. The more adversity that happened to me, like, the more motivated I was to just keep pushing the pedals.
I'm so glad you did. I ask a question of all of my guests, and that is to tell me about one day of their trip. Now, for a lot of my guests, they might be cycling around the world. They have a lot of days to choose from. I want you to choose from one of those 12 days and take me and the listener there and tell me about that day.
Oh, I think it's probably the second last day of the race, when I had just passed by the fourth control point in Karakeli in Turkey, and I started heading to Istanbul. But it was the parkour 4, the gravel parkour. This is the one, I think, where the top 2 guys, like, they got 5 or 6 flats. They ran out of food and water. I was hearing horror stories about it. Right before I hit that gravel parkour, I was having problems with my cleats, so I couldn't actually clip my shoe into the pedal. So I was only really attached to my bike with one shoe. And the climbs on this were nothing short of horrific. Like many of them, I think, were probably over 20% grade. And it took, I think, 6.5, 7 hours to get through it. It was just steep, steep up and steep, steep down. And it was relentless. And I thought actually credit to the TCR organizers, the way that they did the parkours this year were brilliant. So some tested physical fitness, some tested, technical riding skill. Parkour 4 tested mental fortitude. It was meant to just slow you down and make you want to quit. I have never ridden anything that challenging in my entire life, and it was over 40 degrees Celsius. And I got to the top of one hill and I stopped, and I remember getting off my bike and just screaming an expletive like as loud as I could. And it tested me. I enjoyed it because I knew it was testing our fortitude. And it was the final push of absolutely nails roads until we got to the finish line. That relentless up and down, when you had already been through so much and you heard of everyone getting flats, running out of water, it was meant to try to break you. And so it was really actually motivating to get through that to the other side. And that, I think those 6 hours, I think, are burned into my memory for the rest of my life.
Wow. I think they also go into, I've said it a few times, I stole it from a guest. They talked about the experience. And so when they go on an adventure, they pack all this experience into their panniers to take with them. I imagine there will be times when you're training, riding in an event, doing your world record ride, which we'll talk about soon. It's those moments that you'll draw on, potentially. Like you can draw on, you've gotten through this and you've got all these points where you can say, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, you can do this. And mental fortitude, you've got to be like off the scale in that, Sarah.
There's a certain calmness that comes when you're really thick in it and you have hours and hours to go, and like the pace is excruciating. It took like an hour to do 5K. You're getting rattled on the bike. It's 45 degrees Celsius. There's no wind, there's no shade. And I think the level of focus you have to get through that is really remarkable. So it's like you almost black out everything except move forward. Stay calm, move forward. That is your job.
It reminds me, I interviewed a guest, Jude Crywald. Hi, Jude. And he did a ridiculous adventure through West Africa, which included a ridiculous few days spent in the Liberian jungle, where it would be fair to say he really walked his bike as opposed to rode his bike most of that time. And it was super challenging. I think he had days where, well, Jude, I'm going to get it wrong, but he might have done like 9 kilometres in an entire day.
Oh, no.
This is like through thick jungle. But what Jude said, and it reminds me exactly of what you said, was this idea of he found his absolute flow. There were no decisions to make.
Exactly.
He had no option but to keep going. And because of that, he just felt this, I don't know if calmness is the right word, but he was just in it, given into it. He couldn't complain, so he wasn't going to. That was going to do him no good. And that's sort of similar to what you're saying there, isn't it?
Exactly. When you think about how awful the situation is or that you're uncomfortable, it's almost beside the point, because what is that going to do? Like all you need to do is just like move forward. No one is coming to save you. Like you are your own SOS. And yeah, calmness is exactly what comes to mind for me. It was like a moving meditation. Again, going back to this, it's like your job now is to just make progress. Yeah, those hours I think are some that I'll remember for a very long time.
I think a lot of the race will be burned into your mind for a very long time.
Better or worse, yeah.
And I wonder, are these memories things that are coming to you as you train for your next challenge? 2025 is going to be a big year for you, Sarah. What's on the cards?
So in May 2025, I am preparing for a world record attempt in the UK. Yeah.
Would you say this has been a long time in the making, and is this almost a hark back to your evolution as an ultracyclist, but also the non-ability to do the running record?
Yeah, I feel like for me, this is going to be closing a chapter in my life. So the lay jog record for the running, I couldn't do. So I've pivoted now that I'm on the bike and I'm doing Les Joggle, so Land's End, John O'Groats, Land's End, so a cheeky wee there and back of the UK. The idea really came to me after talking with my coach and looking at my ride data from TCR this year. And I'm incredibly strong on pavement. And if you just let me go, I can cover 600K a day. Like, that's fine. And so I figured I really loved that aspect of eating huge mileage in TCR. What I didn't necessarily love was the danger and, some of the distraction with the rules that really prevented efficient forward progress. That's not exclusive to TCR, but just adventure racing. The record idea really came to me. How can I exploit what I think my strengths are with this kind of endurance related challenge? So I'm trying to blend, the time trialing that's so famous with Les Jog with the ultra endurance cycling. So it's a 2,700 kilometer time trial, essentially.
And you've got the endurance engine, and now it's really honing in on those specifics of aerodynamics as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're still going to be optimizing for comfort because it will be several days. So I like the added challenges of this, in that, you need to optimize for comfort, for sleep. You can't just straight shoot this like you can the Les Jog record. It will be some aero work that's needing to be done, but with a consideration for comfort as well. So I think it's a really lovely blend of disciplines.
Your training weeks will be ramping up then too now. I know we were talking earlier, you were on 32-hour training weeks. What are you at now, and what are you looking at ramping up to?
So right now I'm in the saddle about 15 hours a week. So still kind of off-season levels, if you can call it that.
If you can call it that. There's nothing normal in an ultra.
So about 15 hours a week in the saddle, and then about 4 hours a week on top of that working with my strength coach. That will probably ramp up again to, 30 plus hours a week in preparation and the build for May. But the nature of those miles will change. So we're doing a lot of max VO2 work, power work now. We've successfully brought my zone 2 up by about 30, 40 watts since TCR. So now we're looking to maintain that, build on that, and then start packing on more base miles as we approach the record attempt.
As with all things with you, Sarah, there's a great structure and a lot of planning and research is going into this as well. I imagine also you're going to be using this as a fundraiser as well?
You're absolutely right. Yes. So I'm going to be fundraising for a brilliant charity called the Bike Project. And they're based here in the UK. And what they do is they refurbish bikes and they distribute them to refugees and asylum seekers who are newcomers to the UK as a way to give them financial freedom so they don't have to pay for public transit, and as a way to, help embed them in communities. So they teach refugee women, for example, to learn how to ride a bike. For some of them, it's the first time they've ever been shown a bike. They take them out on community rides. They show them how to achieve freedom via bicycle.
The Bike Project, my gosh, I love you. I love this. What a great thing you're doing to raise awareness for that.
For me, the bicycle has changed my life completely. It's changed the way I see myself, the way I envision my own capabilities. And especially as a woman on the bike, it's given me a whole new range of access to opportunities. And I come from an incredibly privileged background. So I can imagine that the impact that it has on women who are quite disadvantaged and quite at risk would be, infinitely more. And so I just think the more we can do to get some funding behind this charity and charities that do similar work, the better, because it will be fully transformative.
I know that you have hosted refugees yourself and actually seen this transformation take place before as well, haven't you?
That's right. Yeah. So I've been really fortunate for the last 3 years. Been working with referral organizations as a safe house for solo female asylum seekers and political refugees. So I've housed, 2 women from Kiev, one from Afghanistan, as their entry point when they come into the UK. We ensure that they're hooked up with English services, get them registered for NHS for benefits, and help them integrate into local communities. So one of them did receive a bike actually from the Bike Project. So I witnessed firsthand how it made it easier for her to attend classes, to go get her groceries. It's been really incredible to see, directly how much more change even a bicycle can have in the life of somebody.
That enabling aspect of a bicycle, even for simple transportation, just makes such a tangible difference as well. Listeners, I'll be providing a link in the show notes to Sarah's fundraiser. I fully encourage you to get on board, find out more about this charity. And this is a UK-based charity. I'm sure with a simple Google search, if we put in stuff for our country, we may even find ones that are very similar from wherever you are listening to as well. And if you're into bike adventures, you're most likely going to be into helping support people out in this way. So I encourage you to get on board. Oh, Sarah, I'm super excited for this.
Thank you. I'm very excited too. I'm very nervous, but very excited.
I'm going to be cheeky. I say this to a few guests that I interview before a challenge is done. I'd so welcome an opportunity to touch base with you after the joggle and go through what's happened.
Absolutely. We can talk live on the road if I'm not too deep in the pain.
Oh my gosh. I'm so podcast. Send me your voice notes and we will do this.
I might be crying, but
I'm an empath, so I'll sympathy cry with you. Sarah, I have to wind things up, and I don't really want to, but if people do, other than want to see the charity link, they want to follow your story, is the best way to do this via your Instagram account?
That's correct, yeah. So my Instagram account is my main platform at present, so it's Not That Kind of Doctor is my handle. In the coming weeks and early into 2025, I'll be starting to share our campaign for the charity. I'm going to be sharing a lot of what I'm going through in preparation for the world record attempt, the emotions I'm feeling, the training I'm doing, and I really just want to make the entire journey accessible to people. It's very important to me. I am an everyday person. I work a 9 to 5. I am not some remarkable athlete. What I am doing, I firmly believe everyone is capable of doing, and I really want to lift the lid on it and share my story in hopes that other people can set themselves big goals and have the confidence to follow through with it. Follow me on Instagram if you're interested in hearing more about that as we progress towards May.
Hell yeah, and people, as someone who has followed you on Instagram through other challenges, it's also pretty cool, entertaining, fun and unique to go into your world and to be given the insights into what you're feeling, because it is every bit of the emotional spectrum. And
I don't filter any of it. So.
Unfiltered and raw and real. So I will provide a link in the show notes, listeners, so an easy way to see Sarah there on her Insta account too. Sarah, time to wrap the show up. 3 short fire quick questions. The first one's music related. You're a guest of the podcast now, which means you get to go onto our ridiculously long music playlist. Each guest has a song chosen on it, and it is the song that they choose to be the soundtrack to their adventures. What song are you going to choose to represent you?
Great question. I'm going to go with I Am the Highway by Chris Cornell.
First off, love Chris Cornell. I love this song. Yes.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Listeners, I shouldn't be biased, but I love it when guests choose a song that I like and it goes on the playlist.
You're one of the few who knows this song, actually. I'm really, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You're kidding?
No.
Well, it's a great song. Next question. You're given a choice one day. You can choose to go in one direction and be forever riding over an endless, corrugated, washboard, ridiculously bumpy dirt road. Or you can go the other way and be riding into a horrendously horrible, never-ending headwind. Which one are you going to choose?
Headwind.
I had an inkling you were going to go the wind.
Headwind.
You're training for it, right?
Yeah, you know what? I think headwinds are really challenging. And every time there's a windstorm here, I purposefully go out and I seek it out because it forces me and it teaches me to remain calm. I always think, when you're given a choice of 2 different paths, you have to choose the one that produces the most change. And so I think the headwind would challenge me in a way that would develop me more than just a bumpy road, which I think would make me just angry.
Trust me, I've been on the bumpy roads and they do make you angry, even just for a few kilometres. The headwind does too. I feel like the headwind makes me feel ripped off, but I love that you're on Team Headwind.
Yeah.
All right, Team Headwind, I've got you down. Final question, Sarah. This is a relatively new one. I've only asked it of the last few guests, but I love it because the answers I get are so unique and diverse. And that is, I want you to finish this sentence for me. And the sentence is, the best thing about taking a bike adventure is...
The best thing about taking a bike adventure is meeting people who are so different from you, but being able to find a common connection in your humanity.
Oh gosh, I love it. It's a theme that's come up before. And I imagine you've got stories around this too.
Yeah, like when I was in Turkey, I went to sleep outside a mosque and a group of women came and found me. They fed me, they let me into the mosque, they washed my hair, and they let me sleep there for a few hours. We didn't speak the same language. We came from completely different backgrounds, and there was just nothing but pure human connection, and I could cry just thinking about it. It was one of the most beautiful experiences, and I think of those women all the time.
I love it. I love it. And I love your unique answer. Sarah Ruggins, wow. It has been an absolute pleasure to swap stories and to hear your story, to share time with you, and to hear your insights and experiences from an amazing life, really. I knew when I was going to interview you that the topics we'd cover off on would be things like mindset, resilience, grit, challenge, doing the thing that scares you. And we've had some great laughs along the way. I've got another little insight into what drives you and the person that you are. I think I came across a quote which I really think sums you up well, and it said, "I am obsessed with improvement. I feel it's my greatest strength and greatest weakness. I feel I must realise my full potential in all its forms after I survived what I did. Otherwise, my second shot of life will be for naught." My goodness, Sarah, you are living and breathing that mantra in you. You are an inspiration. I am so thrilled to be able to feature you on the show. I can't wait to see what pans out with Le Joggle. I certainly invite you someday to come and experience the mountains, to fall in love with them in the Pyrenees, now that you like them. Come and visit me there and stay, swap stories. But all is to say, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so, so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your insights and experiences here for us at Seek Travel Ride.
Thank you so much, Bella. It was an absolute privilege.
Well, listeners, I'm sure you heard from my voice that I was super energized speaking with Sarah there. It was amazing to hear her talk about her story, to find out how she has become the person she is now, and how she's used what many of us would consider to be extremely major setbacks as a way to move forward and define what she is fully capable of. She's 100% about testing her limits, pushing the boundaries, and I especially love the idea that she seeks out to just do the thing, not be scared and overawed by it, but rather do it so that you don't need to be scared by it anymore. Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to be keeping an eye on your socials and tracking your progress. And listeners, I encourage you to do the same. Now, are you enjoying Seek Travel Ride? Do you want to find out more about the Seek Travel Ride community? Then I encourage you to sign up to our Seek Travel Ride newsletter, where you will get news from me here at Seek Travel Ride, letting you know about who our future guests are going to be, where our past guests have gone and what they're up to, as well as news in the Seek Travel Ride community from listeners too. To sign up to the newsletter, hit the link in the show notes, and you get to look forward to the bike adventure inspiration coming to your inbox from us here at Seek Travel Ride. Until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.
Hey, awesome listeners. Are you loving what you're hearing on Seek Travel Ride? Do you want to keep the good vibes rolling? Then head over to our Buy Me a Coffee page and show your support for the podcast. Just a little virtual caffeine love can keep me brewing up the content which you adore. Click the link in the show notes, buy me a virtual coffee, and let's keep this podcast party going. Thanks, legends. Now back to the episode.